Today's podcast is brought to you by Blue Canary. The bird has landed on beautiful Bainbridge Island, conveniently located at 499 Madison Avenue. ASE Master Technician Clint Ramsey brings over 15 years of experience, award-winning diagnostic skill, and a desire to reinvent the automotive repair experience. Schedule an appointment online at bluecanary.biz or call them today at 206-451-4220. I got something for your mind, body, and soul. I got something for your mind, body, and soul.
You have found the B.I.STANDER podcast. Now here's your host with the most, Tiny Tim.
What's good, Podcastville? Happy generic time of day to you. Thank you, Blue Canary, for your sponsorship. You, as a listener of this podcast, can also support the show through Patreon. I am sitting here with the lovely Rachel James, about to have our second rendition of our conversation because, once again, this tech-tard did not hit record. Rachel, how are you?
I'm great. I'm going to do my best to be brilliant a second time.
Yes. I apologize for that first performance being so good and not capturing it.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Funny story. It's not so funny because I should be able to hit record. That's the most basic thing to this position. But yeah, I've done it quite a few times. Dow Constantine, Howard Schultz, talked to him for hours and never hit record. And you're in rare air with 5 or 6 other people that had conversations with me that never aired.
It's for your ears only.
Yes. Well, I enjoyed our first conversation, and we'll try to float through this fake conversation the second time. Rachel has a film that she wrote, directed, and starred in called Ingress, which was entirely shot on Bainbridge Island. We have been talking about this sci-fi movie that is her first baby, right? Your first pet project that you've completely owned from start to finish?
For sure, yeah.
That's pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
And you are, don't tell anybody, but an LA transplant.
Yeah.
And been on the island for half a decade, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me, it's going to be hard for me to find new questions now. Tell me what Ingress means and why you thought this was a project that you wanted to tackle.
Sure. So Ingress means an opening, a doorway, a way in. It's for me, it's evocative of the opening between realities. So it's a sci-fi film that I wrote about a woman who can move between parallel versions of her life. So the title, I think it evokes that sort of sense of an opening and a moving through. So that's where that comes from. As far as why this project, I don't know exactly, except that sometimes ideas just pop into my head. And in the case of this script, it was just this one scene I had that actually didn't even make it into the final movie, but I had this vision of a little kid sitting in a foster home, and it's noisy and chaotic, and then you see her kind of close her eyes, and she opens them, and she's in this room that's completely still and like pristine and quiet, and she just kind of smiles. And I was like, well, that's an interesting scene. I wonder what that could be. And then I just kind of start, like, it kind of builds on itself.
So like a paradigm theory that you work backwards from that scene?
Kind of, except that ended up being the very first scene. So in that case, I kind of worked forward, but it doesn't always come in a linear fashion. But sometimes it's like what I've found, a lot of writers will they'll go through an extensive outlining process where they'll be like, I'm going to beat it out from beginning to end. I'm going to know exactly where I'm going. And I've written like that when I was hired to write scripts because they want to see those treatments and those outlines. But I actually find for myself, it kind of stifles the creativity a little bit. And also I think there's things that I discover when I just let myself write, like free write, that I would have never thought to put in an outline because I had no idea it was going there. But then when it goes there, it's like, oh yeah, that feels right. I wonder, oh, that's interesting. And then I'll take it in a whole other way. So I like to give myself that freedom to just kind of play. And then you can always go back and edit. And that's the beauty of it.
So you put on quite a few hats in this as director, writer, and actor.
Yeah.
Where does your strongest talent lie, I guess?
That's a good question. I think in a funny way, these three, so directing, writing, acting, I think they really feed each other. Mm-hmm. So it's something I've always wanted to do. I've done all three of these things on short films before. I've written and produced and acted. I've directed but not acted. And I wanted to try doing all three because in my years of doing all these three different things in whatever ways I do them, I find that, being a writer makes me a better actor. Being an actor makes me a much better director. Mm-hmm. And being a director makes you a better writer when you're writing for film because you just start to see things from all these different perspectives. And when you're writing dialogue, you start to think about, well, would I say it like that, or that no one speaks like that? Like it gives you a context because you're kind of putting yourself in behind and everywhere. So I feel like as I've gotten stronger in each of these roles, I've gotten stronger in the others, if that makes sense. I think they kind of are very synergistic.
Yeah, and insightful too. One leads to another. And you're a singer, correct? I first came to know you in Lizzie with Indie Theater and Jesse Smith. Shout out to Jesse and Shannon Dowling, who also is a contributor to the podcast quite often. Let me back up a little bit to Lizzie because that was sold out performances that just absolutely rocked. And you did an incredible job.
Thank you.
How did you get connected into that little world?
Yeah. So Indie Theater, they were basically the first company I got involved with after
good choice.
Doing the 10-minute play festival with Island Theater. I met Shannon Dowling through that, and then she took me to see an indie theater show, and I met Tom and Matt, and I really liked what they were doing. And then, being me, because I just can't help myself, when Tom said, "Oh, we do people's passion projects," I was like, "Well, I have one of those.
I'm passionate.
We don't do that." So I pitched them The Last 5 Years, which is a play that I've always loved and I did in college. And I wanted to play the role of Kathy again now that I was older. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I had a little bit more life experience to put behind that character. And Shannon directed it. Jesse Smith came in and played my co-character. Co-star. And so that was just a great experience. And then I kind of stayed connected with them. And Jesse looped me in for Lizzie, which I'd never heard of this musical. I didn't even know Lizzie Borden.
Serious?
I somehow missed the whole Lizzie Borden mythology growing up. Everyone else seems to have, Lizzie Borden took, and I didn't know any of it. But
go ahead, sing that for me.
No, that was plenty, I think, what you just heard.
Lizzie. Yeah.
So creepy. But anyway, when I heard the music for that, I was like, my God, this play is awesome. And
it was
so flattered to be asked to play that role. And I had such a good time diving into that crazy, twisted mind of hers and just the power and the hurt and all of it. It's just an incredible character, an incredible play.
Yeah. And that was your first jump into theater around here?
No. So The Last 5 Years was first. And then I did their Under Milkwood at the museum.
Oh, yeah.
And then COVID, and then Lizzie. Lizzie was originally slated to go before COVID, and then obviously that didn't happen. But it was, it was perfect.
God, how long ago was that? 2 years?
It was last October.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then we did it again. We revamped it in Ballard in April.
Oh, yeah?
And we did a second run of it. Yeah.
How'd that go?
It was good. It definitely gave me an appreciation for Matt and Tom. I mean, producing that show is a lot of work. So we were producing it this time around and also doing all the, performing work. So it was great. It was a really cool venue. We did it at the Ballard Underground, which is now called the Give-In, which is a burlesque co-op. So it's a really cool vibe for this show.
A burlesque co-op.
Uh-huh.
So multiple
Burlesque
people are
using
in
the
the
space.
same space.
Yeah.
It's hard to find one, let alone two. That's crazy. Shout out to Tom Challenor and Matthew Eldridge from Indie Theater, friends of the podcast and incredible friends of mine. And they do a terrific job. Tell me about some of the places that you shot this movie at and the difficulties and the things that you enjoyed about shooting on Bainbridge Island.
Oh, I mean, shooting here was a dream. It's just such a beautiful place to shoot. We got great weather. We got really lucky. Just some lovely mist on the days we needed it and no heavy rain.
Beautiful.
We shot in the Grand Forest. We shot down at Fay Bainbridge Park. We shot downtown Winslow at the museum, the Apothecary and Tea Shop, outside the bookstore, the library, and then a couple of houses on the island. I mean, difficulties, I would say we were on a micro budget, which meant, that always makes the schedule really tight. So we had long days and we had to get through a ton of stuff. And so if you hit any snags, you're like, well, we get one take of this, hope it's good. Mm-hmm. And we had a couple of those. But I felt like there was just good vibes around this project because we got so lucky and we ended up getting everything we need. No major, issues. The crew was incredible. People that, we hired and we'd never met or worked with turned out to be just insanely good at their jobs and wonderful to work with. And all the interns and everyone in the community who came to be a part of it, it just had like a great energy. So it was challenging. I mean, wearing all those hats was a lot.
I bet. Were you stressed?
Some days.
Does it bleed into your acting?
I feel like so I had two of the people I brought in that are not local, or my producing partner, Sienna, and she and I have worked together for a really long time. And I just trust her implicitly. And she was our first AD and kind of our line producer on set. And then my cinematographer, Dan Clark, who I knew from LA, we'd done some projects together. He actually lives in Illinois now, but he came out.
It's a weird place to live.
His family's all there. And his wife's a professor at the college. So, but anyway, because I had them, I really entrusted them with a lot. And I had a shorthand with Sienna that kind of developed at a certain point where I would say, there are different kinds of days. There are days where I feel like I'm driving the train. There are days where I'm a passenger on the train. And then there's days where I'm running behind the train. And ideally, I'm driving the train as the director of this movie. But I did. So sometimes I'd come in, I'd say, Sienna, I'm having a running behind the train moment. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where I am. And she would just be like, go step outside, have a breath. Like, we got this. It's all good. And we just we'd move forward. So I don't feel like it impacted negatively any of the scenes. We all kind of just we pulled it together and did what we had to do, But in those moments between, sometimes it was a little, where am I? What am I doing?
Overthinking
What's
it a
happening?
bit?
Yeah. It's hard not to, or people are stressed or, there's just a lot of things to manage.
What was the scene at the Apothecary? Because I'm a big Schitt's Creek fan. And that's where I kind of learned about apothecaries.
Oh.
And that shop.
Yeah.
What did that scene
There's a long
like?
scene. So we shot in the tea shop portion. It's like one of the longest scenes in the movie. It's a date sort of between the two main characters where they meet up and kind of connect and talk about all of their kind of history and what brought them here. And it was all just in that corner table right by the window where you see the cars driving by. Yeah.
Yeah. And you use local actors. Can you name a few that we may know?
Yeah. So we had Barbara Deering. We had Chris Soldevilla.
Stud.
Yep, totally. We had John Ellis in a cameo with Nobel, his stepdaughter, who played young me. We actually do look a lot alike. I was watching her on video and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Who else did we have? We had a lovely woman named Camille Campbell, who's from Seattle, and Christopher Clark, he was in Indie Theater's most recent show. He's also from Seattle. And then Christina Uloa, who lives on Bainbridge, played a cameo. If I'm forgetting anyone, I'm so sorry. I think I named everyone. Oh, Justine Stillwell. She had a cameo.
So tell us a little bit about the story.
Okay.
You wrote it.
I did.
Go into the source here.
Okay. So basically the crux of the story is a woman who, when she was a child, she sort of inexplicably started finding herself shifting between different versions of her life. And she wasn't in control of it, so it would just happen to her sometimes. She'd be sitting at school or something, and all of a sudden she'd be in a different version of school. And so when she was a kid, it was kind of this cool thing that she just like embraced, as kids do. But then as she got older and became a teenager, it started getting a little bit more complex. And at a certain point, and this is the scene Nobel plays beautifully, she slips into a reality where her parents are dead. And then she's not able to get back to a reality where they're alive. And this causes kind of like a mental breakdown for her. And she ends up in foster care, and she ends up then finding a therapist who helps her learn to sort of shut all that down and stay in one reality and control it, and it's done. And so then for years, she's just kind of living in this carefully controlled reality, very afraid that she could possibly slip again. And she ends up marrying a man, and they're married for 6 years. And we pick up the story at the top of the movie when her husband passes away. And in her grief dealing with that, she starts to find herself slipping again, and she's not able to control it. And at that point, she comes together with this other character who he's a spiritual channel. Do you know what that is?
I can imagine what it is. What is it to you?
There's a couple of famous examples of like Esther Hicks, who channels this entity called Abraham. And there's another guy named Daryl Inca who channels this entity called Bashar. And essentially they'll write books, they'll do retreats and seminars for people. And it's bringing through kind of like a context and a support from these other dimensional beings is kind of the concept behind it. So Daniel in my movie is one of these channels, and he channels an entity called Lucas. And Riley and Daniel come together at this point when she's starting to slip, and he's having ongoing doubts about his own sanity. And is this voice he's hearing just schizophrenia? Is it mental illness, or is it actually, So they come together, and it's kind of a journey about how they both come to a place of self-acceptance, and her being able to release and let go of the past while also moving between different realities and kind of finding their way into a relationship with each other.
And they have a similar condition?
It's not the same, but he's able to kind of meet her where she is, in a sense, because Lucas, who speaks through him, kind of connects with Riley to help her learn to surrender to these episodes again and kind of have her own experience, which is the same thing he's kind of grappling with in his own way. How to surrender to these voices, surrender to this sort of experience that other people would think is weird or crazy, but just to trust in it and like follow it.
Sounds awful. Like, I would hate to have to deal with massive demons in my head, or not necessarily demons, but things that I couldn't control or be in charge of, I guess.
But isn't that like the human condition, right? It's like we all think we're in control. We all like to be in control, but we're not.
Yeah.
And like, aren't we at our happiest when we can just like surrender and see where we go? At its core, it's kind of about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, I gotta get better at that.
Me too. Hence the script.
And is this a script that you were thinking about for a long, long time? Or did it just kind of have an epiphany one day and say, this is what's in my mind right now and I need to write it down?
Yeah, I kind of dropped in just a little bit before I moved up here. Not fully formed, but just little pieces of it that then I started to flesh out. And then when I moved up here and I was in this setting, it kind of all came clear. Like, it takes place here. I want to shoot it here. It draws on certain aspects of experiences I've had and things I've interacted with, as well as just things that I was interested in, diving into.
We were talking before I realized that I hadn't hit record. How you felt like this island has been very welcoming in a celluloid fashion. Can you speak upon that a little bit? Like,
oh yeah.
You arrive one day on a boat.
You arrive on a boat. Yeah, I think I've just been continually blown away by the generosity of this community. How, there's not many communities that I've been in where I feel like what draws people together is art. And I think that's a really special thing. And I feel it everywhere in terms of people just their love of the arts and the way they're supporting art, whether it's through their own artistic expression or through supporting other people's artistic expression. And just to be in a place where so many people and so much focus is on creativity and art is just, it's a very inspiring place to be and to be creating any kind of art.
Yeah, it's really cool to listen to people's ideas and visions and see what they're doing, because art comes in so many different ways. I think I stumbled upon you on Instagram, I think, and I was like putting two and two together, and I was like, oh, a girl from Lizzie, yeah. Oh, she knows so-and-so, and then she got this project. This project seems kind of cool. You were kind of piecemealing it out on social media, and I was just like, oh, I recognize that place. That's the Grand Forest, stuff like that. And what did I want to do? I wanted to immediately support what you're doing and find out what you're doing and, kind of champion it a bit and say, this is cool. If somebody's taking a major risk, putting 100% of your name on it, it's
very vulnerable.
Yeah, which can be a scary place, but it also can be a place where, like you speak of, people pick you up and rally around you and want to see you succeed. And I feel like I definitely want to see you succeed. I think what little I've seen of the film so far is impressive, and I can't wait to see more.
Yeah, I'll be interested if how you absorb it as someone who's not really into sci-fi. If it's a story that still grabs you. Because I'm always interested in that in terms of, because I do think this film is a bit of a genre blender. Like, sci-fi is a nice hat to dump it under, but it's not sci-fi in the way that I think most people think of sci-fi, like Star Trek or
or Aliens or Stranger Things.
It's very grounded. It's very earthy and earth-based and based in just a different feel.
So how and why would you define it sci-fi then?
Because I think when you're talking about things like the multiverse and parallel realities, and that just feels like, to me, it falls in the category of science fiction. It is science, quantum physics. It is also fiction. I mean, I think that these genres, their definitions become more and more broad the more people play within them, right?
Right.
Horror, thriller, sci-fi, drama, comedy, dramedy. There's so many blends and variations.
Mm-hmm. I just watched that zombie movie with Jamie Foxx, and I'm like not a zombie guy and not a gamer, and I could see how Killing Zombie Game became a movie, but then the movie started to look like what I perceived a game to do, but then it was blended in Jamie Foxx's comedy.
Right.
It was just a mess, like you say.
Yeah. And
that made it enjoyable. It was a fun ride, and it's a movie I never thought I would watch.
Right.
Woody Harrelson's probably one of my favorite actors, and I never saw Zombieland. I had no interest in it.
Zombieland's kind of funny too. It's kind of the same. It's like a comedy zombie thriller.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to check it out now.
Yeah.
As well as your movie.
Yeah, definitely.
What brought you to the island in the first place?
Wanted to change. I kind of hit a wall about 3 years or 2 years before we ended up moving here, where LA was just draining me, and I didn't realize how unhappy I had become living there. And it became such a fixation on needing to become successful in a very specific way and feeling like I could only do that there. So I kind of had this revelation that like being happy and living somewhere that like nurtures you probably is the thing that seeds and grows whatever success or creativity you're going to have in your life. It's not the other way around, because I'd tried it. My parents live in Port Townsend now. They've been here about 15 years.
Oh, okay.
So my husband and I had been coming up through Bainbridge, visiting them. So we'd always get on the ferry. We'd go to Harbor Public House and have a beer and then drive up to Port Townsend. And so when we started thinking about it'd be nice to live closer to them, and we really like this area, Port Townsend's a little farther away from the city and everything than we'd want to be. And my mom just over at drinks one night was like, well, what about Bainbridge? What about Bainbridge? And then like 3 days later, I was like, hey, Devin, would you move to Bainbridge with me? And he was like, okay. And I thought it'd be a big fight. And then like 6 months later, here we are.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is he in the field as well?
He's in peripheral fields. So he's done marketing and music and tech. And he was a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter on the island for a couple of years when we first lived here. And so he's very eclectic, but he's definitely a supporter. And he understands, and he's helped me with music supervision, and he was our COVID compliance officer on set. So, yeah.
I'm thrown off with the volunteer firemen statement. Is that something that's still going on the island, or did they get rid of that program? Because I felt like during COVID, we had a shortage of firefighters because they were becoming ambulance, paramedic drivers, and such, and we didn't seem to have a volunteer system that I could see outwardly.
So there was, they may be phasing it out now, but it's been there since we've been here. Not on like a massive scale, but they've had, a handful of volunteers.
Yeah, because I know the fire department, they have a teaching ground over there off Day Road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what made we're going off on a different tangent here. What made your partner want to be a volunteer fireman?
It's something he'd always wanted to do since he was a kid, and not in LA because terrifying. But when moving up here, I think he really liked the idea of just kind of engaging that, going through it, seeing what he could do, pushing himself and serving the community. He's always been he loves to help and he loves to be of service. And I think it really fed a really lovely side of him in that way that, being in tech and being in music is just different. It's a totally different side of your whole self.
Well, I know a podcast that could use some help.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for the movie going forward? It's shot and it's in the can. Mm-hmm. What next?
Yeah. So we just finished it last week.
Congrats.
Thank you. Next week, we're doing a little private casting crew screening just so everyone who is a part of it can see it. And then we're submitting to festivals right now and starting to submit to sales agents and distributors. And kind of the next step is going to see like what festivals accept us, and we'll do a festival premiere and kind of do a run of some festivals and then hopefully get picked up, by distribution from there. And then we'll find out, are we going theatrical? Are we going to Netflix? Are we going... And then we can tell everybody where they can watch it. And hopefully many people will, and hopefully they'll like it.
Nice. Have you thought about having a screening on the island?
Yeah, for sure. So we're like I said, we're going to do this sort of private casting crew screening just because we can't premiere it before it has its festival premiere publicly. But once that's happened, absolutely. The Linwood Theater's already offered doing,
awesome.
A premiere. And BIMA, we'd love to do a screening there since we shot there. So yeah, we'll have some fun, putting it in a few places around the island once we can do that. And maybe even, I'll see. I would love to play it at the Rose or at the Starlight Room. It's like my favorite place. Have you been there? In Port Townsend?
Oh, no.
So they have this cute little theater called the Rose, which is very much like the Linwood Theater, old historic theater. And then upstairs, they open this space called the Starlight Room. And it's at the top of
Take 5.
Mm-hmm. It's at the top of one of these old Victorian buildings, and the whole space, it's so before the movie starts, all the curtains are open and you're on these Victorian couches looking out at the city, and then they close it all up and they play the movie, and you can have drinks and from the bar and snacks. It's just a really cute experience.
Kind of like a movie tavern.
Yeah. What's a movie tavern?
Wow, good question. In New York, when I go there, we usually hit this place and it's called the Movie Tavern, and they're recliners, cup holders, a little keypad so you can order your drinks and food during the movie. And then your feet kick up. And
it's like the Alamo Drafthouse theaters, right? Is that similar? I don't
know.
But yes, like that, except Victorian Port Townsend flair.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I recommend it for a date night with your wife. It is lovely.
Wifey, we're going on a date.
Oh.
We went on one last night. It was kind of exciting. It's been a minute.
Yeah, good. Those are important.
Yeah, got out there in the world. Well, Rachel, how can people support or follow your journey?
Yeah. For the moment, as we're kind of waiting to hear back about festivals and such, you can follow us on Instagram at Ingress Film. we're posting updates there. And Melody Maletsky, she's an artist who lives on the island, and she's also a very accomplished social media strategist. And she's been helping us with just our incredible social media campaign. So she's posting lots of cool stuff. And so it's a way to kind of just keep abreast of where we are. And as soon as we can, tell you where to watch it, it'll be there and everywhere. And
watch the space.
Watch the space. Yes.
Well, thank you for coming in and telling me a little bit about your project. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and hopefully looking forward to you having lots of success with it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. We've been talking with Rachel James here on the Bystander podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Be kind.